the homeless person, the tramp, the destitute, the forgotten, all completely invisible. Very much like an actor when they get off stage. I first noticed this the other day when I saw a homeless man. The only thing that he had left in life was his sausage and egg sandwich. See what I mean? Completely invisible. That's the first thing I noticed since leaving drama school. Actors are completely invisible to the industry. It doesn't matter who we are or what we're doing, we just seem to not exist. I always leave a few chairs for casting agents, in case they want to come. The homeless person. We never really see them, do we? I mean, who saw me out there? I was sitting opposite the theatre just before the show began, and you all walked past me. Well, actually, one of you didn't, because you gave me some money. Thanks for that, by the way. I'll be giving it to a homeless charity fund. But that just really proves my point, doesn't it? I was sitting there and nobody noticed. Which is why now I'm going to make you notice. I'm going to tell you my story of going through drama school to sitting here before you today. Exaggerated for effect, of course. Now, of course, I needed a way to structure this rather long and frankly complicated story, because life isn't a storybook. It doesn't have a definitive beginning, middle, or an end. Well, actually it does, but that's not the point. The point is that it doesn't have a traditional structure. Every life is different. And so, to help with that, I used the structure of the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The basic structure, if you've never heard of it before, goes like this. The familiar world, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, the belly of the whale, and the return to the familiar world having changed. Or, to put it another way, it's basically Star Wars. We've all seen Star Wars, right? Yeah. Thank God. I thought it was going to be one of those days. But in Star Wars, you see, Luke Skywalker starts off in his familiar world. He meets a kooky old wizard that tries to get him to go on an adventure, but Luke refuses the call until there's nothing left for him in his familiar world. Then he goes on a wild adventure where he enters the darkest moment, or the belly of the whale, as it is called. He then returns to his familiar world, having changed. So, with that basic rundown out of the way, let us begin with Chapter 1, The Familiar World. Hello, my name's Matt. So, there I was, back in September 2020, just after COVID-19 had ruined the nation, but before Liz Truss did. I always forget about that. Anyway, there I was, walking through the school corridors, not knowing what the future had in store for me. I bumped into one of my teachers in the sixth form centre, who's asked me what I was going to be studying at university. I stood there for a moment, trembling with fear, because, to be honest, I hadn't really thought about it. So, in a moment of sheer desperation, I blurted out the first thing I could think of. History, sir. No, that's not where you were expecting this to go, was it?
No, I wasn't.
So, after that, my teacher stood there for a moment and then said, "Now, brace yourselves, teacher joke incoming. Aye, lad, there's no future in history." After that rather interesting encounter, I rushed upstairs and proceeded to try and find any university I could, as I now had finally figured out what I wanted to do for the future. After trying and failing for many weeks and realising that I probably actually needed a degree just to figure out how to open the drop-down menu on the UCAS website, I'd finally developed a list of universities that I wanted to go and see that had history and, well, let's face it, would accept my grades. So I started to book up open days. Or, to put it another way, a day where they tell you exactly what you want to hear and lie to your face. So, as the days went on, I started visiting these universities, and I had to sit through lecture after lecture after lecture after lecture on history and how important it was. One of the lecturers actually gave us a talk on Roman remains and architecture that lasted an hour and a half. He then proceeded to walk us into town and give us another 2-hour lecture, where he said things like, "Now, this wall is 9th century, but this wall is 19th century. Now, as you may remember from my last lecture, there were many exciting lectures like this to be had. On one of the few breaks, while we were waiting for another one of these exciting lectures, the others busied themselves arguing about who swept the floor at the Roman Colosseum in the year 466 AD. And I sat there, wondering to myself if university really was for me. It was then I spotted them. The actors, walking through the corridors with a confidence that you rarely see. They seemed to float through the corridors, with their locks of long hair and long, flowing coats behind them. The others seemed to laugh and mock them, but for me, it was love at first sight. I knew there and then that that was my calling, to become an actor and make my way out onto the world stage. To be fair, it wasn't the stage that first attracted me to it, but the locks of long hair and long flowing coats, and the ability to walk into a room with a confidence you rarely see. The rest of the day, my head was filled with thoughts of what it would be like to become an actor, of walking onto stage for the first time, of being in television. I could be in Bridgerton, the girls, the films. By the end of the day, I was Tom Cruise. This was actually happening. And of course, the community I would be a part of. When I got home, I rushed upstairs and deleted all my application letters and started applying for drama schools. The next day, I bumped into the teacher who had asked me what I was going to be studying at university. He asked me how I was getting on, and I told him about my quite sudden change in career path. To which his response was to simply shake his head, rub his eyes, and say in a low, weary voice, "Aye, good luck, lad." And then he walked off, tapping me on the shoulder as he went. Now, after a few days of sending off letters and application emails to different drama schools, I finally started getting some responses back, saying they wanted to see me for auditions. My mind raced with the different possibilities. What should I do? How should I do it? What am I going to do? Oh God. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I've never actually been on stage before. Chapter 2, The Call to Adventure. My first problem was something they called an audition piece. Of course, I later found out this was just a monologue. We had to do two, a contemporary, or modern day piece, and a classical, or an old piece. Now, of course, the modern day was easy. I'd watched so much television over the years that I could practically recite one of those off by heart. So, of course, I decided upon Doctor Who. But what I couldn't decide upon was whether I should do Matt Smith or David Tennant. After much deliberation, I eventually decided upon Matt Smith, due to no other reason, sharing the same first name. I'd calmed down a little after getting my modern monologue sorted, and now it was finally time to start focusing on my classical one. I was particularly fixated by a Shakespeare piece, as I felt I needed to get that exactly right in order to impress the audition panel with my awesome acting talent and make my dreams come true. So, I started to book up some classes, and I found some at the RSC. I mean, why not go straight to the top then? And so, I went into the class, and you'll be surprised to find that all the actors there seemed fairly, well, normal, you know, for actors. There wasn't an overcoat in sight, you know, flowing through the corridors. But nevertheless, we did start the class, and to be fair, they gave me a lot of good and useful advice, some of which I still use today. One of which I thought was very important for my audition. They told me, "So, when preparing for your audition, you might be inclined to do a lesser-known speech, such as Mercutio's Queen Mab speech from Romeo and Juliet, or Iago's Fool speech from Othello, but everybody does those. And quite frankly, we are sick to death of hearing them. What you should do instead is a more well-known speech, as you'd be surprised how little we hear those. Every casting director would tell you that." So, with those words ringing fresh in my ears, I got home and decided that I was going to be performing the most famous Shakespeare monologue ever known, the to be or not to be speech from Hamlet. Now that I decided on what speech I had to do, I had to figure out a way to do it. I watched the famous actors to get a read on how they felt was best to portray the character. I read articles about what the speech meant and how to decipher the iambic pentameter. Still don't know how to do that. And of course, I practiced and practiced and practiced. And so when the auditions started to roll in, I was ready. Every day brought a new audition. Unfortunately, a new rejection letter. Until I only had 2 left, and I decided to give these last 2 everything that I had got. First of these, I was driven to the audition by my parents, only to walk into the room and find the usual suspects you would expect. A smorgasbord of characters, from those prancing about doing meticulous vocal warm-ups that sounded more like they were aggressively throat singing, to those who were just sitting there, eyes closed, obviously reciting lines that they had learnt in their head. Now, I'm going to be honest. After my rejection letters, I was starting to feel extremely out of place. But nevertheless, I took my place in the room, sat down, and began to recite my lines to myself. Now, you know how much work by now I put into this monologue to try and get it exactly right. So, after about an hour or so of sitting there and jittering with nerves, I was called into the room by, well, I don't think there's any other way of saying this, a rather eccentric lecturer. "Now, please come in. Get yourself prepared and then we can begin." There were 3 of them in the room, judging me. I felt like I was in court, you know, without the suit. I stood there in the room, my future in their hands. All I could think about were the rejection letters. Okay, just give yourself a moment to prepare and then we can begin. After giving myself a moment to focus, I was finally ready to start saying those immortal words. To be or not to be? Hang on a second. Okay, sorry, just start again whenever you're ready. To be or not to be? Just one moment, please. Okay, sorry. Just start again, please, from the top this time. Okay. To be, or okay, thank you, that will be all. We'll be in touch. And just like that, my audition was finished. And with it, my chances of becoming an actor were finished with them. I left the audition room dejected and headed back to the car where my mum was waiting for me. So, how did it go? She asked, and I answered, somewhat honestly. Yeah! Good! I hadn't dared tell her how it actually went, and how my dreams had been shattered into a million pieces, and how everything that I had been working towards had been taken from me, just like that. After a few weeks, I received the dreaded email. Or so I thought. I'd been accepted! I couldn't believe it. I was beyond excited, and started planning my new life as an actor. Growing out my hair, and buying a long coat. Chapter 3, the refusal of the call. This was going to be the making of me. I was going to be remade as a great actor who would soon be on the path to the Oscars. I was ready for drama school. So the moving day eventually came, once I'd gotten over my inevitable feelings of homesickness and started settling with my new flatmates. I was finally ready for our first actors' meeting. I rushed across campus, thoughts rushing through my head of what it would be like, only to get in the room and find nothing short of a menagerie. Nothing, and I mean nothing, was like what I expected it to be. Instead of the cool, collected, long coat-wearing, cigarette-smoking masters of their trade, what I found instead was a collection of lovable misfits, of which I was happily invited into their thrall. And then I met the lecturer. We were given some of the do's and don'ts of the course. Okay, class, so there are only a few rules when it comes to the course, and they are: do not be late. 10 minutes early is on time is late, and late is inexcusable. Secondly, always wear black, movable clothing. And thirdly, always remember to do your vocal warm-ups. But the most important rule, less of a rule and more of a law in the acting world, do not be late. So, the time came for our first class, and it was comedy. And on our first day, our comedy teacher was 30 minutes late as the class. I know! I couldn't make this stuff up. We all thought it was some kind of perverse joke or maybe even a trick. You know, he was watching us from a secret room with one of those two-way mirrors, like in the films. But no, it wasn't that exciting. He did eventually turn up at 10 minutes after the point we'd all grown sceptical, shouting, "Sorry I'm late! Ignore that! Traffic was hell!" He then proceeded to tell us to take our shoes and socks off, grab a red nose from the props box, and then, well, what happened next has been stuck in my head for the last 3 years. Okay, my darlings, it's time to massage the floor with your feet. I'll show you. Make it worse, my darlings. Now it's time to massage the floor with your ankles, not your uncles, Matt. Your ankles. Make it even worse, my darlings. Arigato, dance. By wall. And that was just the warm-up. But to go back to the red nose for a second, because that actually has a really interesting story behind it. At the end of our first class, after we were all absolutely exhausted, our lecturer told us that we needed to find our own red nose and 2 tennis balls. An easy task, you would think. Yeah, so did we. We were given a week to do so. Now, it turns out finding a red nose was the easy part. You just had to go to one of the local joke shops. But a tennis ball, well, you'd struggle to find any of those unless you're at Wimbledon. Loads of sports shops, but not a single one sold any tennis balls. We ended up having to club together and buy them in bulk online. Now, you might be wondering what we had to do with these. Well, nothing, as it turns out. A few days later, our lecturer came into class and proceeded to teach us something else. Okay, class, so today we are going to go over a few exercises, the first of which I like to call evolution. Now, this was intriguing. Were we going to learn some new Karate Kid style game that would teach us how to wax a car or cut a bonsai tree, that would in turn teach us how to become incredible actors? Well, no. What happened next was nothing short of gloriously weird. And of course, I later found out that that would not be the only time I would think this. The rules of this game are as follows. You will start out as eggs. Wait. Eggs? But I'm an actor? But he continued with the rules anyway. Basically, the rules went like this. We started out as eggs, and then we played rock, paper, scissors, and the winner transformed into an amoeba. At which point, we played rock, paper, scissors again, and the winner transformed into a dinosaur, then a gorilla, then a caveman, until finally we became a supreme, which should have been a supreme being. But our lecturer thought it would be funny to be one of the supremes. You know, baby love, baby love. Yeah, I would sing more of the song, but I couldn't get the rights. Anyway, once we became a supreme, we joined our lecturer at the front of the class and sang through some of the Supreme's glorious back catalogue. Strange as this game sounds, it actually got very competitive. But after about 3 months of this, we all were getting hungry for some real acting. And our first taste of it wasn't the best. It was referred to as the object exercise, where we had to show what we did once we got home after our class, without using any words. I thought this would be an excellent way to show off my physicality. So I started prepping what to do. I focused on what I did once I got home, really trying to marry my physicality and my own personality all together in one neat little package. And this is what I had to show for all my hard work. Doors change positions. And after that rather moving performance, my lecturer simply sat back and proceeded to say to me, "Matt, do you really feel like you belong on this course?" I'm going to be honest. When he said that, it did cut me a little to the quick. Was I truly not worthy of having a place on this course? I spent many days wandering around campus thinking this. And of course, I did eventually get over this feeling and focus on the greater tasks ahead of me, but, you know, there were days when I did think about it. Until my final year, when I was talking to one of my course mates and they told me that they'd been told the exact same thing. I couldn't believe it. It seemed to be a way to cool the wheat from the chaff, in order to prepare us for our next challenge, a proper scene, in a proper play. We were told we were either going to be doing A Doll's House by Ibsen, or Three Sisters by Chekhov. And after a few days, our lecturer came into the room and said, "Okay, class, so today it is time for you to embark on your next acting challenge." We all braced in anticipation for what would come next. "So, we have decided that you will be performing a scene from Chekhov's Three Sisters." Suddenly, a loud stentorian voice shouted up from the back of the room, "But I've read The Doll's House!" We all turned towards the source of the noise, only to find a man standing there in a bright yellow suit, long flowing hair at last, a white shirt open to his chest, and a bright gold medallion hanging around his neck. Our lecturer stood there for a moment and said, "Why aren't you wearing your blacks?" The man stood there, grasping his belt like he was a cowboy ready for a duel. "I don't have any." After that rather interesting encounter, our lecturer just told the man to sit down and that he couldn't partake in the class. After a few more incidents like that, he himself decided that he didn't want to partake in the class anymore either, and he vanished just as quickly as he'd arrived. But to get back to the more interesting story, we were given about 6 weeks for our performance, and we were paired off into groups of 2. And I was paired off with one of the coolest girls in the class. And no, I know what you're thinking, but no, we didn't end up dating. Life isn't like that. I didn't actually see her much after that. Although, she did give me a hug at graduation, so see, that's a win. Small victories and all. But, you know, we practiced diligently on our scene and worked really hard. And I decided to use one of the resources they'd given us. It's called the Actors Thesaurus. Now this is basically a cornerstone of our course. It basically gives us a list of words to associate with lines in our script to help us really feel the emotion. And I decided to use this to try and make our performance the best it could possibly be. So, after many weeks and weeks and weeks of practicing, we were finally ready for our performance. Now, when I say performance, it was actually in a classroom in front of our peers, of whom the only ones who would actually be paying attention were those who had already done their scene. But nevertheless, we set up our stage, we got ready for our performance. And just as I was getting ready for my big monologue, I glanced over to my lecturer, who was sitting there, waving his hand, shouting, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" I just don't believe it. I don't really feel it. You're not in the moment enough. And there, that phrase, I just don't believe it, can be used to sum up most of my time at drama school, both good and bad. Because, to be honest, at this point in my time there, I was really starting to have my doubts. But, you know, I did try and solve wrong. And acting wasn't the only class I had on the course, of course. I did have movement, voice, dance, comedy, all of which seemed to have the same results. I just not really feeling it. None of this was reinforced by our next project. Basically, we were given the task of developing our own theatre piece. I thought this would be my final chance to show people what I'm made of. Instead, it was another downward spiral. I thought we'd get a lot of creative freedom with this part of the course. Turns out, it was only the illusion of freedom. After working for about 2 or 3 weeks on what we thought was the perfect piece, blending elements of comedy and tragedy together, our lecturer simply came in to watch us and uttered those immortal words. "I'm just not really feeling it. I think you need to start again." Me and my group worked with what we had to try and make it the best. But being told to start again was most disheartening. I thought we were the only group getting this, and that we would obviously get the lowest marks. But it turns out, I later found out that every group had gotten the same treatment. Drama school really does have a way of breaking you before they build you back up again. I realise now that those early lessons were not so much to teach us skills on acting, but rather to teach us lessons about moving on. Chapter 4, The Belly of the Whale. I don't mean to say all this to say I was regretting coming to drama school, but that I was certainly starting to have my doubts that it was all it was cracked up to be. But then something started to happen after breaking us down. They started to build us back up again. It started slowly at first. That worked well here, and a well done there. And then expanded out into bigger things, like asking for our feedback on certain parts of the course, making it feel more like a dialogue than the student-teacher relationship that had been fostered thus far. This gave us all a lot more confidence, and for me, I finally started to come out of my rut. I felt like I was finally crawling out of my cave after a long winter to the warm glow of summer. I finally felt like I could enjoy more and more aspects of the course, and I slowly started to smile more and more each day. And all of this was reinforced by one of our final projects. Our final in-house production was fast approaching, and this was something we always looked forward to. It was always done in a professional theatre with a professional director, and I, for one, couldn't wait to see what it entailed. After a few weeks, we finally found out what the play was going to be. It turned out to be Noel Coward's Hay Fever, a play I'm very fond of, and one I'd actually been wanting to perform for some time. So, after a few casting workshops, we were finally cast, and I was given the role of Sandy Tyrrell, a rather strapping young boxer. I don't know if you can tell, but I don't know what type of boxer we are. Don't answer that. That was a rhetorical question. But, you know, rehearsals went rather well, despite the fact I felt like I'd been miscast, which didn't help with my feelings of not being worth a place on the course, but, you know, I pushed through and I did adjust the character to an amateur boxer who had never actually won a fight. But everybody loved him. He loved that. This worked really well, and I had the time of my life with this character. I had learnt my final lesson. It's not the character that you're given, it's what you do with that character. That's what makes the performance stand out. I was ready for the outside world. Now, it's a strange feeling. When you finally get out there, you're alone, and nobody's telling you where to be and what to do. It sounds great, but that really was the question. What to do? I realised then that is what I loved so much about the art of acting. Pretending to be all these characters, dealing with their own problems, using them as a shield, pretending I was fine even though I really wasn't. I was just burying my demons down. And I think that's why I started to lose my love for the art form. Because, well, I didn't truly love myself. And so, with that being said, Chapter 5. The return to the familiar world, having changed. I carried this feeling throughout most of my graduation, right up until I returned home, which is when I was finally ready to start my life as an actor. Which is when I had this epiphany about myself. I realised that I was letting everybody else's choices affect me. So, I went to my go-to in times like this. A list, a plan. I set out a series of long-term and short-term goals. Short-term, get 2 acting jobs and an agent. This is not as easy as it sounds. The best way I can describe this is like the chicken and the egg. To get an acting job, a good acting job, you need contacts or an agent. But to get an agent, you need to do work so that they can see you. After many weeks of trawling through Spotlight, getting auditions that, well, let's just say they weren't really feeling it, I realised I needed to start putting on my own work. I was lucky and managed to put on a few shows, beg, borrow and steal other talented people to help me. And you won't believe it, I actually got an agent. And not just an agent, a London agent. I was in the big time now. Roles were sure to follow. I mean, the film industry loves London, and the West End. I'll be on top. I have to say, my agent has been very good. I've been put up for a number of roles. A surprising number of cat food commercials. Always shot in Poland for some reason. Not so many West End shows or Hollywood films. Well, why not so many? I mean, none. But you know, it's only been 4 months. So, early days and all, I suppose. But of course, I do still get the dark days where rejection after rejection comes in, and I feel like everybody's against me. Even my agent. That's when the dark shadows of doubt start creeping their head around the corner. Letting every failed audition get to me. Letting every rejection get to me. I think that's when I started to realise that I was feeling lonely. That like the hero in the hero's journey that it's named after, I'd returned from my quest and felt empty. In the stories, it's rare to find out what happens to the hero once their quest is over. And I think, well, now I think, it's because they end up feeling unfulfilled. I mean, they completed what they set out to do. They restored balance to their world, and now they have to go and live their life again. And that is much like an actor. We go on stage, do what we have to do, give the audience what they want, and then we have to retreat back into anonymity. And so, we come to the end of my story, so far. And for those of you that are here now, just remember, while there might not be many of you in the audience, I mean, the League of Gentlemen, and there are 3 people in there for this audience, so you know, see this as a league. I'll be on the up, just you watch me. But I think now it's time that I'm leaving you, to leave you with a quote from the master of words himself, William Shakespeare. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard from no more. Out, out, brief candle.